Yeah, she's down there in the bottom.
All right, we are live. Hello, friends. This is going to be a really fun day of Small Biz Founders episodes. We are kicking it off with one of our masterminders, Maria Dismondy. So say hello as you're starting to join us. We'd love to see you. Say hi. Tell us where you are in the world, maybe even what platform you're watching on, because we're airing this into Facebook groups, on our Facebook page, and onto YouTube. So it is in a lot of places.
And then it will eventually air on the podcast, hence these Small Biz Founder episodes. So sometime in the future, you'll all be, in on it. You'll have heard it. So it'll be great to revisit this episode.
And if you're watching in the replay later on, just write in the comment replay. So if you're joining now, say hello and tell us where you are in the world. And we're going to jump into our first live podcast episode that will be broadcasted later on in the year on the Product Bus. All right, ready, Minna?
Yep.
Ready, Maria?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, we have a different intro, don't we, on this one? Small Biz Founders. It's like we haven't. It's like who knows what we do? Who's the producer on the show?
We changed it. So it used to be where we would splice it in, but I think we've been trying to not do that, right, Jennifer? Yeah. So I would say just hop right into it with the introduction.
We do the intro live now. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are doing a really fun episode today. It's a Small Biz Founders episode. Again, I'm Jacqueline, and this is Minna, the co-founder of The Product Boss and your co-host. And we're going to jump right in. So we're excited to welcome to the show today Maria Dismondy, and she is the owner of Cardinal Rule Press. So welcome to the podcast, Maria.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you. We have the honor of working with you right now in our mastermind, but we've actually known you for years. You were sort of famous to us actually you were in the virtual world of like people talk about you, and we were part of the Biz Chicks community and other communities. And so we've known about you for years, and we're so honored to be able to work with you too.
This is the first I've heard of that. And I have always fangirled you. So that's funny. That is so funny.
So funny. And now we're friends. And we get to work together. So tell our listeners a little bit about what Cardinal Rule Press is, because this is actually a different type of business, product business than we've ever had on the show.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Well, Cardinal Rule Press is a publishing company, and we are traditional. So we do not charge any of our authors to publish their books. So we finance all of the projects. And that looks a little bit differently as far as what the authors receive as far as royalties go. But if you think of Scholastic or Penguin, any of the big publishing houses, they operate with a traditional business model as well. And so we specifically publish children's realistic fiction. So they're books that empower children to be their best selves. And we started doing this many years ago. I actually started out as a writer myself. I wrote 10 books and got a little bored with that and decided I wanted to give the opportunity for other writers to get their books into the world. And I've always been super passionate about the message. So Cardinal Rule Press is really, really tuned into helping children to feel empowered in their life. And I'm just so hopeful that we can help make a difference.
I love that.
Is that where Cardinal Rule comes from? The name? How did you name the
company? Yeah. Well, in my first book that I wrote, Spaghetti in a Hot Dog Bun, there's a cardinal that appears multiple times. And cardinals have always been really special to me. And I don't know, I guess maybe my mom told me this, but when my grandmother passed away, when we would see a cardinal, we'd think of my grandmother. And I know a lot of people do that. So that's why I included it in my book.
Yeah, we do that too. My sister tells me all the time how she's like, I saw my third cardinal today. There's lots of cardinals in the Midwest here. So tell us where you're from too. So listeners can get an idea of where you're from and where you're located.
Yeah, I'm also in the Midwest. We're in a town outside of the city of Detroit. So we're in Wixom, Novi, Michigan. And I've lived here my whole life. I love it.
That's so great. So how did you become a children's book writer? Like, did you just wake up one day and say, I'm going to write, 10 books for kids? Or did you have any education in terms of like, were you a teacher in the past, or what led you in that direction?
Yeah. I was a teacher. So I taught for 12 years, first and second grade. So I studied education, with a minor in English. So I've always loved books. I read books all the time. And, I was in a very diverse community as a teacher, and I saw a lot happening with my students of, I had a lot of Indian American students, and their families would invite me to dinner, and they would give me a sari, and they would cook this fantastic meal of curries and tandoori chicken. And the students would be embarrassed. My students would be embarrassed that their parents were giving me a sari and that they were welcoming me into their home and sharing all these traditions with them. And it made me sad that they were embarrassed of who they were. And I thought, gosh, I want to teach my kids to be, I called them my kids, my students to be, to have courage to be themselves. And I looked for a book in 2005, and all I could find were books with teddy bears and talking dinosaurs. And I realized there weren't a lot of books that actually featured kids that looked like my students. And so I said, I'm going to write a book, and I'm just going to go on the Google. At that time, I don't even know what it looked like in 2005, and tried to figure out how to do it myself. And I guess I'm a very motivated person, so I just didn't stop. I received, I sent out 90 submissions. I received 88 no's, and I received 1 maybe and 1 yes.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and then I realized at some point, the book was published, and I had found out I was pregnant. I went back to teaching after I had my daughter part-time, but I started to do the numbers, and I realized I could be home working part-time, building this business, and actually make more than teaching. So that was the decision I made.
Wow.
And a greater impact too.
Yeah. So then how did you find your next author? Like when you decided, okay, I'm going to move from being an author to a publishing company. I mean, that's also a really big leap that I wouldn't even know where to start. So where did that go?
And, I should tell everyone that these questions are not planned. You did not give me a heads up as to what you're going to ask. But I actually hired a coach, and which is why I believe coaching and masterminds are so powerful. The coach said, just through talking about, what wasn't working for me, what was working, she said, you know what, Maria, I think you're ready to do this for other people. You're ready to have a business of your own where you publish other people's work. And I was like, no way, I'm not ready for that. Well, then a few months later, an NFL player came to me. He saw me on the news, and he said, I want to write a children's book. Can you do this with me? And I said, okay. So everything that the coach told me was true. And I brought him on. I wasn't happy with the business model I brought him on as. I did it more as a hybrid model. And so that was kind of like testing the waters. So that was the book, The Little Linebacker, with Stephen Tulloch, who's retired from a few teams, but he was retired from the Detroit Lions here in Michigan. And so that really sparked my interest. I liked it. I liked being able to push the limelight away from myself and put it on someone else.
Wow.
You've done a lot of bold moves in your business. I feel like you went from a teacher to a writer to a publisher, a publishing company. And then now, can you tell us a little bit about what your business is now? Because it's even further away from that in how that your business has evolved.
Yes, that's a really great question. And I actually made a bold statement the other day that I'd like to take a few months off of risk taking. I need a little break from risk taking. So the business has evolved. A lot of how I finance the business, people always wonder well, how do you have the money to finance all of these books? Because to print and publish one children's picture book, if we did it on the low end, it's about $7,000. But, we like to add some fancier features now with our books, like a glossy high UV coating on the cover. So it's anywhere between $7,000 to $13,000 is what you're paying to produce that first run of books. And so I always finance the business through my speaking. So I was speaking as an author at schools, and that's how I made the money to finance the business. And I operated on cash at all times. And during COVID, that went away. So COVID took a big hit in my speaking engagements because we weren't going anywhere and no one wanted visitors in schools. And so at that point I said, I needed to take a pivot and really focus on the sales of the books, not just my speaking. The sales of the books really need to fund this business. And the way it works in the publishing the publishing industry is you have front list titles, which are your new books, and then you have your backlist titles, which are the ones that have been around forever. And you really want a couple of those backlist titles to be big sellers because that's what's going to bring in that income every month. So I had like 3 out of, let's say 18 titles that are really big sellers. And it was a very serendipitous moment that I met a woman who was selling her publishing company, and she had another few really good backlist titles. And so I purchased a company, and we closed a few months ago, and all the changeover is happening July 1st.
Let's
So
say
that's
you
another
acquired a company, which is big, bold moves right there.
And it's not just any company. You don't have to say what it is, since I don't know if you're telling the world, but it's this book that I knew about, that Jacqueline knew about. It's just this amazing big opportunity. I just see such a big vision for you, and you see such a big vision for you. So I think that that's the thing that sets you apart from other people, is that you're willing to take the action. You don't necessarily know how to get there, but you know enough and you figure it out and you just go for it. So I know you said no risky moves. Of course, when you phrase it like that, let's just reframe that a little bit. I think that, you've taken the action to get you into these really big opportunities. And I think that that will really serve you well, even moving forward. But I think that even in the time of 2020, when people were scared and people were like, ooh, speaking engagements are over and, that sort of thing. You made it work for what you needed it to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And, fear comes in a lot, but as soon as it comes in, I push it back out because it does nothing for me. Fear and worry. At first I thought, gosh, how am I going to afford buying a whole
Do
entire
you have the
business?
fear? That's kind of where I was leading, is like, do you have fears even when you're like, can you speak to like how you deal with them?
Yes. They come up and then I push them back out. So I acknowledge,
you don't push them down, you push them out.
Yeah. Like no down. I don't put them under a rug, but they come in, I acknowledge them. And then it's just like worry. I just acknowledge it and I say, what is worrying and being fearful about this going to do? It's not going to make me more money. So we're going to push it out. Right. So I definitely get fearful, but I guess being a visionary, I think I know that there's a lot of possibility in the world, and I'm not afraid to take that risk. And you know what? I don't want to speak to this other. I did take another risk that didn't work out so well. But what did I do? And I don't want to, go too deep into it because there's another business involved. I got on my feet again. I just said, okay, this isn't working. It's been a few months. I spoke with other people at our mastermind retreat, and I was like, I got to make this big decision. And can I talk to you about this? So I definitely kind of get feedback from other people. And it was a lot of headache and work to make the decision. And I did. So I was fearful. I made a decision. It didn't work out. And then I made another decision to get out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And to be able to make those decisions quicker, even in our company, we've decided that we're going to have like a 3-time max conversation about something. So if something bugs us the first time, we talk about it, we flush it out. Second time, we're like, okay, this is getting annoying. That's a second, but let's give it one more go. And if it comes up a third time, it's like, why did we even, third time need to make the change? Because it's a lot of energy and time wasted on things that we could be putting our time into things that are going to fill us up, and move the worry out. So I love that you made that decision.
I've heard of that, Jacqueline. I've heard of that before. And you're supposed to be able to use it in your personal life too. If something's bothering you, you can only share that thing with 3 people. And then after that, you need to move on.
I like that. I haven't heard that one, but that's good too.
Yeah, I think the moving on is the main thing though, right? Like holding on to things. And I think that there is a certain thread that comes in for all of us. When I was sitting next to you, I've had the pleasure of sitting next to Maria at dinner, which is exciting because we usually don't get to do that, with being all virtual. But Maria came to our in-person mastermind in Phoenix that we had recently. And I was sitting next to you and you were telling all these stories of when you were a little girl in Detroit growing up. And you just seem like you have that grit, that, tenacity. So can you talk a little bit about like growing up, and did you have entrepreneurial influences? What do you think led you here?
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it because I want to be that for my own children. My dad, 100%. I mean, my father was really, he modeled work ethic. He owned a car dealership for many, many years. And then after the car dealership, he went on to something else. He was always testing different companies out and trying new things. And as a child, he was just awesome. He's still around and he's still great. But for example, he bought my sister and I our first cars. And that's a big deal. But he said, listen, this is how much the car costs. You have to pay me monthly payments back. So you need to find a job. And I was in high school. I didn't even have the car yet. And I started taking the school bus to a fried chicken place to work after school so I could start making money. And he said, it's due on the 10th of the month. And if you don't pay me by the 10th, you're going to get a $25 late fee. And guess what? He charged me that late fee. I was late. He charged me that late fee. And I started to learn what it was like to have to work, to have to pay for something that you want, and to make payments on time. And he did this in so many ways. And then my dad also, he took, when we had big celebrations, like we were Catholic, so we would have like catechism or communion and things like that, and people would gift us money. He took that money and he invested the money. And I remember as a kid, my sister and I were always like, Dad never gives us our money, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? When I was in my 20s, he said, I'm gifting you your investment, the money I invested for you, it grew to this amount. And it helped me to make a down payment on my first house when I was in my 20s.
Wow.
And it was such a gift that he taught us that putting your money away into something that can help it to grow will be beneficial down the road. So absolutely, I had great models in my dad.
It just reminds me of my son did a commercial when he was a baby, like 18 months old. He got like $6,000 or something, which, was a good starter of a savings. So I remember when he got a little older and I was like, we've got this savings for you. I keep telling him like, you're so cute. You should do commercials. But he's like introvert, nobody look at me sort of kid. But he cried the first time I told him his money was in a bank. He didn't understand how this bank was locking up his money, but then as he's gotten older, the idea of like your money grows, like the bank gives you interest, it's high yield savings or whatever it is. And it's going to grow to this and this and this. And I think as he was older, he starts to understand it. So there's so many amazing lessons I think we can teach our kids as entrepreneurs. And obviously you had a father that taught you about money and respecting money and making payments and being responsible for yourself. What do you think you're passing on to your children? What are you trying to share with them?
Actually, can you tell the story about what you did for your daughter? This kind of answers this question that Jacqueline had. Remember that when your daughter turned 13 or last summer? Can you tell that story? It's so beautiful. And I think that you passing that along was just like something I took from our conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes. So I read a book, and I'm sorry, I can't think of what the book's called right now, but it was written by a Christian woman. And it talked about how all these different cultures have this coming of age when children turn 13. Like you have a bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah if you're Jewish, and all these different examples. And she said, well, we don't have anything. So she created this own journey for her daughter. So I took that and ran with it. So when my daughter turned 12, every month we explored a different profession. So based on her passions and her interests. So she's very creative. She likes to make things. So we, one of the things we did was we visited a bakery in Detroit. We met the owner. We talked to the owner, who was very young, about her job and what she liked to do as a kid. And then sometimes we did Zoom calls with people. So one of the things, my daughter likes children. So she said, well, maybe social work or being a librarian. So we interviewed a librarian on Zoom. We interviewed a social worker, ask questions. My daughter would read books about these different things. We would watch movies that kind of related. Ruby loves to read. So we watched the Book Thief, which was a movie, and she read the book. So we just really dove in deep on all these different things. We would do field trips, books, movies. And then when she turned 13, I invited women in her life. So some of her friends and our aunts and neighbors. And we had a henna artist there because henna tattoos are a big part of celebration. And I gave a speech about my daughter, and she was so embarrassed, but just how proud I was of her to interview different people and to explore all these passions, so that now she knows that her talents and her passions can be part of something that she does when she's a grown up. I don't want her to feel limited into going into something that, she has to go to college for and she has to make this amount of money. I want her to know that she can grow something based on what she enjoys and what her interests are.
I love that so much. I'm getting a little bit choked up listening to it again. I just think it's so beautiful and such a gift. What's so funny, going back a little bit to that whole money thing and what we're teaching our kids, the thing that I was teaching my daughter about money and, you could do anything, like just trying to get to this beautiful thing that, taking what Maria said, this is the beautiful thing about you could do anything and you can make your money and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to build it up and I'm going to buy a Tesla. That's what she said. I was like, okay, you can.
It's her goal.
Yeah.
Oliver wants a Mustang. He also has like a Mustang plan for his money. So there you go.
And
Dreams.
then we're doubling
Yeah,
whatever
dreams.
they save.
Well, it's the
So
closest,
that's
think
kind
about
of
it.
our
It's like
goal.
the closest goal for them, right? Because they're not thinking about a house or like leaving their parents or, or
Yeah.
like even thinking about having to pay for school. So they're like, ooh, but when I'm 16, I can drive,
Yes, exactly.
These kids are amazing.
I know.
Is there anything else like as an entrepreneur that you feel like you want to pass down or any sort of, that balance and struggle? Because I know teachers, as a teacher, and I think you said you had her while you were working, but you've kind of, maybe you have your summers off. And now as entrepreneurs, it's like, I'm not 100% sure what time we have off, quote unquote, right? It's kind of can be at all times, or we can take extreme amount of time off. So how are you finding that balance as you've grown this business? Like it is a huge business and you're acquiring a new one as well.
How do I find that balance?
Yeah.
So that is tricky because tomorrow's my kid's last day of school. So we have routines and schedules to kind of keep it, and my priority is really being with my kids. I love the summer and I love exploring. So I do take a lot more time off for work and my team knows that. They know what my boundaries are in the summer. It just looks different. It definitely looks different. And so I think like the values-based living has been really important to me as I've been in this business and just remembering what's important to me. I could have grown this business 15 years ago. I really could have. When Spaghetti and a Hot Dog Bun came out, I think I could have really gone in different directions. But at that time, I was growing my family. And so I kind of held off on the growth of the business. And there were many opportunities that I turned down because of where I was at in life. And I think it's important to recognize that. The other thing I wanted to speak to is, as much as my dad did really wonderful things, when I told him I was leaving teaching to grow this business, he was shocked and said, well, you went to college for 6 years to get a degree to be a teacher. Now what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I'm using that degree to do what I'm doing now. But what about your health insurance? You've got great health insurance. So he had all these fears for me, even though he was a risk taker. He was afraid for what he gave me. Like, is she going to be able to do this? And, I think just anyone listening, things are different today. And I really don't think that all children need to go to college. I think the trades right now, people are making big money in the trade business. Like we need plumbers, we need, people to run construction sites and men and women.
Drivers.
I don't
For real.
think
That's a for
The
real
product
legit
bosses
thing.
are requesting truck drivers, please.
Truck drivers.
Exactly.
It's holding up the entire supply chain. So truck drivers
Please.
really, because it's a dying industry, they actually do need people to come in. So that's an
Please.
ad
And
for
yes.
the economy.
Thank you. I think that's yes. But just to put your kids in a box and say, you must do this, you must do that. I think things are really changing and you don't need a college degree to do all of these things. And some children might not need that experience. So
you don't need a college degree to become a TikToker or a YouTube star? Just kidding. That was like the goal of all the kids. But I 100% agree. I mean, I was the first person to go to college in my family and when we were in school, that was what you did. It was that transition where like you had to go to college. And if you didn't go to college, there weren't opportunities. And I agree, especially with like the beautiful business that Minna and I have created here and even our own product businesses that yes, I went to school. I went to college. We studied as a fashion designer, but I am very aligned with you where I'm like, there's such possibility now for people to be creative and take their gifts. And with the access of streaming services, Instagram, Facebook, all the things you reach people.
People need education. That's the thing. So even though it's like we don't need college, we don't need the degree, I agree. I think the trades are great. You need the skill sets and you need to be a lifelong learner and you need knowledge. So there's lots of people that don't get access to that. So we're,
Yes.
for us, we can say, college or no college, but there's some people that don't even get that possibility, but they need access to knowledge, to classes, to skill sets, because your dad, when you told him you were leaving, he didn't realize that he thought that you obtained that knowledge from college, but really he gave you those skill sets, to be really, to be a lifelong learner, to figure it out, to be really resourceful, to take something and, take nothing and make it into something, So I think that doing all those things is really important. And I do think that people do need to be lifelong learners, because it's like you get to college and you do think, oh, that was it. I got a degree, check that off the list. And now I go work in the workforce. But the thing about entrepreneurs that makes them so special is that they need it. They want it. They have that need for creation, that need for knowledge, that need for learning. And I think that, if there's anything that I want to teach my kids, is that you continue to learn more about yourself, self-awareness, as well as the world around you, So I think no matter what you end up doing, and again, if it's a truck driver, you just keep learning too,
Yeah,
listen to
So
podcasts.
yeah,
it's true.
still pushing
And
that truck driver thing.
I think that's a great kind of like wrap up in the call. But there's research.
I love that
from
Maria's like ending the podcast. She's like, okay, and this is the conclusion of this podcast.
Well, I just have to say
kidding,
to that, Career Builder did a survey a few years ago, and they surveyed all these companies, and the company said, okay, it's great. We're getting 4.2 students, which I didn't even know you could get a 4.2 until recently.
Nice.
I was like, I thought it stopped at 4.0.
Yeah, same.
Not with APs.
And so they said, we need, it's great. We're getting all these academic students, but we need people who can communicate. We need people who can think outside of the box and go above and beyond and create something. So it's interesting to think that way. So I agree with you, Minna. Yeah.
But I do. And what I guess, sorry, I'm not saying don't learn, because I tell everybody, like, you should go to college because you grow in college, like you're independent and all that. But because we're in the arts, so
You're
even
forced to learn.
Yeah, even actor kids that I know, like, we're like, still go to school and like grow up a bit there, right? Have that responsibility to yourself. But it is. I mean, I think it's that general, just well-rounded human that understands learning and collaboration and whatever that looks like for everyone. But it lets our kids be a bit more flexible. Like, I'm excited about what's to come because you can be more flexible. It's not like I have to go study English and this is what I'm going to be. Like, there's so many more opportunities now, and like we can create a lot of those ourselves as well. So
and your kids can read our books. Your kids can read our books to get a lot of those skills. So
100%. And that's the beautiful thing about the company you created, right? I think, like you said, it's a good way to wrap up because it brings it all together, and that you are trying to reach children. Your impact is even more than the students within your classroom.
Yeah, you're empowering them with skill sets. That's the thing, is like they read those books, they take that gem of knowledge and they're like, oh, this is how values and character and all these things happen. And nothing in the world happens without that underlying part of it. So, I mean, what you're giving them truly is a gift from a book. So that's amazing.
So tell our listeners how they can, buy from you, follow you, connect with you. Just let them know how to follow Cardinal Rule Press.
And what book should they read first?
Yeah. Okay. So Cardinal Rule Press, you can go to a bookstore. We always say, if you have a bookstore in your town, we'd love for you to start there. But we're all over online. So Cardinal Rule Press website, Instagram, what have you. And you can see, if you're watching, you can see some of the books behind me. We have different languages. So what book should you read first? I would say Spaghetti in a Hot Dog Bun or Chocolate Milk, Por Favor, which are two books I wrote. They're based on stories from my own childhood and experiences that I had. And it talks about that in the author's note. And then we have some new releases. This Could Be You is a new release that came out in April, and it's by Cindy Williams Schraben. It is a beautiful book for anyone who's graduating, whether graduating from preschool or graduating from high school, because it talks about how the world has so many possibilities for you.
Oh, I love that. And I'll say that for our product bosses out there, the world has so many possibilities for you. So I hope that this
Buy it for
episode,
yourself.
yeah, I hope this episode inspired everyone. And anybody in your life that you're like, you want to support a small business as well as authors doing amazing things for the children and the world, go ahead and support Cardinal Rule Press. And Maria, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria.